station. Any unattended articles are likely to be removed without warning.
This is the Hour of History Cities podcast with your host, Stephen Bauman. The Hour of History Cities podcast, as well as other Hour of History podcasts, can be streamed and downloaded at hourofhistory.com, iTunes, Google Music, our YouTube channel, and TuneIn. Be sure to also check out our Hour of History blog at hourofhistory.com/blog. And now we begin the Hour of History Cities podcast with your host, Stephen Bauman.
Hello and welcome to Hour of History Cities podcast. This is the World Cup edition, and I'm taking you to the host cities of the Russia 2018 World Cup. Now I'm doing this in order to tell you some of the significance of these cities, explore what it means to have cities in our world, why cities are such important places, and at the same time look into this Russian World Cup and see some of the more significant places that are going to appear on more televisions around the world than any other sporting event. On Hour of History, it's our world, anytime, any place. And today, we're going to the Caucasus region of Russia. These two cities that I'm going to talk about today are the southernmost cities of this Russia World Cup, and they're absolutely pleasant cities to visit for people who are planning on going to the games. Not only because of the beautiful buildings, the beautiful culture that these two cities have, but also because of the slightly warmer weather and proximity to water. So proximity to water is a theme that we've been talking about throughout. Many of these cities in Russia, and as with cities throughout the world, typically use rivers as sources of transportation, sources of water, and even sources of protection. Rivers are central to cities, and we saw that with other previously covered cities like St. Petersburg and Moscow. This is certainly true for the case of our first city, Rostov-on-Don. As you might imagine, Rostov is on the River Don. It's in southern Russia. It was established as originally, before being Russian, it was ancient Greek colony. It has a long history of being an important location, not only because it's on the river, but also because the proximity it has to the Sea of Azov, which is very close to the Black Sea. And if you had been watching any news about Crimea before Crimea became a part of the Russian Federation again in 2014, this is the area of the world that I'm talking about. So Rostov, it has 1 million people, so it's not quite as big as a city like Moscow or St. Petersburg, but it's absolutely significant in terms of Russian cities. It has a sort of diverse population. There's some religious diversity. There's mosques in Rostov. There's synagogues in Rostov. There's Old Believers churches, which are these Russian Orthodox that sort of rejected the sort of Russian Reformation, if you will, within the Russian Orthodox Church. And there's a large amount of Armenians as well in Rostov-on-Don. So it's kind of a very interesting, diverse, one of the more diverse cities in the Russia for this World Cup. During the Civil War, Rostov-on-Don was definitely a fought location between the whites, the loyalists to the Russian monarchy, and the Reds, the loyalists to the new Bolshevik revolution. In fact, when the Bolsheviks win the war, they demolish a couple of Rostov-on-Don's most important cathedrals, St. Alexander Nevsky in 1908 and St. George Cathedral, which was built in 1783. So some historic and contemporary cathedrals were destroyed when the Soviets took over. Some of those have since been rebuilt, so Rostov-on-Don has these remade sort of historical landmarks, which is something we tend to see in cities that have had a tumultuous history under various regimes. And that's certainly true with Rostov-on-Don. It has these landmarks that were associated with the Russian Orthodox Church, which was in favor and then out of favor and then in favor again, but those are there for you to see. Rostov-on-Don is just an hour and 35-minute flight from Moscow, but it's quite a long drive. I think a lot of people coming to Rostov-on-Don might go through Moscow, might go through St. Petersburg. It's pretty well connected to Russia. Now, I'd like to look at the shields in the coat of arms to sort of get an understanding of the self-perspective of these cities. And Rostov-on-Don's coat of arms is it's one of the more basic ones. You have a medieval soldier presented on a shield with a bow and arrow and some weaponry and a helmet, and on the other side you have a castle with the old Russian imperial flag, the flag of the Russian Navy, and that is on a field of blue and red. So not one of the more complex flags. It does tell the story a little bit of Rostov-on-Don being an important port city, being an important city that's built, like I said, around water, and that gives it some important status within the Russian Empire, and that's one of the reasons why the population is so high. Now, the stadium in Rostov is Rostov Arena. It's got a capacity of 45,000 seats. It was broken. The ground was broken for this stadium in 2013, and what's interesting is some World War II shells were found when they actually broke ground on the stadium, but they continued to build it, and it turned out to be a very beautiful stadium, and I think it's going to be a treat for anyone who goes to watch it. There's some significant games that are being played there. Brazil is taking on Switzerland to open up the action June 17th, Uruguay, Saudi Arabia, South Korea, Mexico, Iceland, and Croatia. And then on July 2nd, it hosts one of those round of 16 games, which kind of tells you how significant Rostov-on-Don is and how it's an important city in this 2018 World Cup. Now, the other city that I'm pairing with Rostov-on-Don is the most southernmost city for the Russia 2018 World Cup. It's a city you might be familiar with if you pay attention to sports, because just 4 years ago it hosted the Winter Olympics. So the city I'm talking about is Sochi. Now, Sochi is very close to the nation Georgia. It is on the Black Sea. It's almost Western Asia, but I think it's still considered part of European Russia. It's certainly in the Caucasus region, and it's a subtropical climate because it's on the Black Sea. You're going to see palm trees. You can see people enjoying the city as sort of a beach town. It's another very diverse sort of city that has links to all these ancient civilizations, the Scythians, the Cimmerians, the Roman Empire went there, the Georgian monarchy took over at one point, there's Byzantine basilicas, there's Ottoman heritage. It's been fought over numerous times. It was won by the Russians in 1820s during the Caucasian War, the Russo-Turkish War. The Russian and British Empire fought over it in the middle 1800s. So it's been an important city that has a very contested history. It's changed hands numerous times. And when you get these sort of regime changes in cities, that's when you get really interesting population mixes and really culturally diverse areas with a lot of shared culture between them. So Sochi is certainly an interesting place, and that was visible during the Winter Games. Also, because it hosted the Winter Games, even though the town has only 300,000 people, which is relatively small for a World Cup host city, it has all the amenities that one might expect when going to see the 2018 Russia World Cup. So everything that you could want is in Sochi, and it sort of has this structure already in place for people who want to enjoy these Russia 2018 games with all the amenities they need. As a result of that, the venue for Sochi is actually the Olympic Stadium, Fish Olympic Stadium. It was originally enclosed for the Winter World Cup, but it's since been reconfigured, reopened. It now has an open roof, so all that sunshine's going to get into the stadium, make the pitch nice and green. It seats around 45,000 people, maybe a little more. It's going to be used in some very exciting games. It was used in the Confederations Cup because it was one of those stadiums that was already finished in 2017. And in 2018, it's going to play host to some of the more interesting matches in the World Cup. Kicking off on June 15th, you have Portugal versus Spain in that big Group B matchup, the Battle of the Iberian Peninsula. You have games Germany versus Sweden in Group F with Zlatan Ibrahimovic announcing his return. And Sochi's also going to hold both a round of 16 match and a quarterfinals match. Looking at the crest and coat of arms of Sochi, it's a vexillologist's sort of nightmare. Vexillology, the study of flags. Just because it's so busy, they wanted to show off all the sort of beautiful natural geography of Sochi when this was adopted, just in the 90s. And so you have a sun representing the sun. You have a palm tree because it's one of the more northernmost subtropical climates in the world. Okay, you also have waves because of the Black Sea. You have mountains because there's mountains there. And then in the center, you have the fire cauldron of water. I don't know. I've looked for explanations. It's a cauldron with fire and rain coming out of it on top of all those four symbols. It's just one of those busy maps. Sochi's a beautiful place. They don't need a busy, ugly flag to represent it. Apologies to Sochi apologists out there who are fans of the flag. I'm not. It's a beautiful place. It deserves a beautiful flag. If you get a chance to go to Sochi, it's also close to one of the most beautiful railways in the world, the Caucasus Railway that goes just, within feet of the Black Sea that you can take north through Russia. And it's just a fabulous railway journey. Any chance you have to get to the Black Sea is one that I think would be strongly endorsed by any Russian or any Georgian or any Armenian or any person who's been to the Black Sea. So these are our two cities today, Rostov-on-Don and Sochi. They're both in the Caucasus region, and they're going to host some fantastic matches at these Russia World Cups. Both cities have water play an important role. They're both port cities that were important for the growth of the Imperial Russian Empire, and they continue to be important for the significance of Russia as we approach this 2018 World Cup. So enjoy these cities if you're lucky enough to get to them. Sochi's only a 2-hour flight away from Russia. It is very accessible, and it's going to be a great time. So this concludes these two cities for Hour of History Cities World Cup podcast. Here, it's our world, anytime, any place. Thanks for listening.